The time of convening has arrived. It's 1 o'clock, and I welcome everybody here today. It's we were given today and tomorrow to hold these hearings, and I'm very thankful that most of the people in our group don't have a whole lot in the supplemental appropriations, so we were able to squeeze everybody in. And you can see on the agenda how close it is. But if you have additional time and you have a need, certainly we respect that, and I appreciate everybody coming. We have a new committee. We don't have too many new members here yet, but what I would like to do, as soon as we ask the blessing, I would like to go around and let each of us introduce themselves and maybe give a word or two about where you came from before you got here and what your background is. Vice Chairman, if you'd ask the blessing.
Let's pray. Let us pray. Father, we thank you today for your many blessings. We thank you for the folks that are here. We ask again your protection and your healing of the State Patrol that was injured. Father, we just thank you for that service and for all the folks that give public safety in this state. We ask that we would be responsible in what we do and put the monies and the funds where it needs to be and help the folks and keep this state safe. For it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Okay, my name is Bill Hitchens, and I'm the chairman of this committee, and I sat over there where many of you sit today for many years. I spent 43 years in state government. Prior to that, I was an intelligence officer in the military and stayed in the reserves for 30 years, but I started off as a state trooper. I worked at CJCC with a couple of you for about 5 years. I was Georgia's first Homeland Security Director, and then I was the Commissioner of Public Safety for the last 7 years. So I've sat there and I've come forward and proposed my budget, and I know how you feel, and what we want to do is make sure that everything gets addressed. I know many of you have some problems. A lot of them won't be in the amended budget, but and I welcome anybody to come see me at any time privately if you want to discuss any of your budget issues. So start with the Vice Chairman here. This is his first day. So.
Thank you, Chairman. I am Danny Mathis. I'm from District 149, which I live in Cochran, Georgia. I have a little background in public safety. I was an EMT for years. One of the first groups that went through EMT training back in the early 70s. I think my number was 1181, so you can imagine that. In the funeral business too, but in the coroner business for years. My daddy was a coroner for 40 years in our county, and I was for 18. I have a son that's at now. So I appreciate what our folks in the GBI and the State Patrol and DNR, all the folks do, and our sheriff's departments and all of our responders, firefighters, all those folks. I truly understand what you go through, and I know that it's tough, but I know we were talking about salaries a good bit over in the appropriations general meeting over there a little bit ago, but it is a special reward when you help people, and it takes special people to do that, and I commend all of you to do what you do, and those that own this committee and Colonel has talked about his illustrious career, and I appreciate that. So I'm here to serve you. I'm just a regular person, and I want to see this state safe, and I want to help the folks that do this succeed.
Mandy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Mandy Ballinger. I represent District 23, which is wholly located within Cherokee County. Prior to entering the legislature, I was on I guess you could say almost the consumer side. I worked with domestic violence victims and also child victims through a prosecuting attorney's office, domestic violence shelter, and a child advocacy center. So, I'm well aware of the vital nature of a lot of what we do. And my husband is a judge, so I kind of get it coming and going. Anyway, that's it.
My name's Stan Gunter. I'm from the 8th District, which is Towns, Union, and most of White County. I worked my way through college as an EMT. I was a DA for 12 years, and then I was a judge for a little over 7. And so I have a basic understanding of what y'all are going through. And anything I can do to help y'all, let me know. Thank you.
State Representative Eddie Lumsden. I serve the 12th District, which is all of Chattooga County, Somerville, and about half of Floyd County, Rome. I'm in my 6th term. I'm a retired state trooper by profession, so I have a little background in public safety. Colonel Hitchens used to be my commanding officer, so, you know, I won't tell the joke. But I've served in that capacity as a retired trooper. I also ran for public office at the local level, served as a county commissioner for 2 terms, and oversaw things in the public safety arena at the local level. So I have a pretty good understanding about the things that you face. I see our DOC friends here on the front row. I have Hayes State Prison in my district, and one of the first things we had to deal with when I was elected was we had some issues up there. So I got indoctrinated pretty early on about how things need to go. So we're here to help. We're here to provide you with the resources that you need, and feel free to reach out to any of us as we go through this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Bill Werkheiser. I serve the District 157, which is an hour inland from Savannah, 4 counties, Tattnall, Evans, Appling, and Jeff Davis. Was in the printing business for 30-something years, do some real estate now, and guess my affiliation with public safety has been prisons. Been to every state prison in the state, and got to do pretty much everything from SWAT sweeps to executions to everything that the department has been involved in. So most of my knowledge is on the correction side, but I've enjoyed serving on this committee. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. 28.
Alan Powell. I guess I'm probably the senior member of this, but hell, I'm a senior member of a lot of things. I've been a member since 1990. Back in the 90s and in 2000, I chaired the Budget Committee for Public Safety. I currently chair Regulated Industries. I live in Hartwell, Georgia, up on beautiful Lake Hartwell. Welcome any of y'all to come visit, but quite frankly, we've got enough people living up there as it is. Too many that are moving in from out of state. I'm very cognizant of the overall picture about linking all of the departments that make up our public safety venue, corrections being one of them that I've been very close to. I want to thank the chairman of this committee. It caught me off guard that we were meeting this quick, but we are off to a raging start.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Scott Holcomb. I represent District 81, which is DeKalb County, roughly around Spaghetti Junction, the north central part of the county. Started my career as an Army officer, and then after that transitioned to private practice of law. I was a prosecutor for a period of time, and then in my legal practice, which focuses on litigation, I've handled a few cases in the last few years on a pro bono basis on the defense side, which has been really eye-opening and changed some of my perspectives as a former prosecutor. And my wife's from Reedsville, Georgia, so I understand the impact of the footprint of the Department of Corrections from her experience. So great to be with you all.
Thank you. And I don't think she wants to say anything, but our analyst here is Courtney George, and she's the one that you probably better talk to the most. She's the one that gets things done, and she's quite an accomplished young lady. She's an accountant and an attorney, and very bright, and she's a lot of help with us as we put things together, and I really appreciate you, Courtney. We're going to use the tracking sheet, and I didn't, something wrong with this? Everybody still hear me? We're going to use the tracking sheets if, I think it's easier. And I hope all of you have an agenda of what the and here comes Al Williams. He's also a member and been here for a long time. And I've never figured out what he did in the past, but. I'm surprised you started Well, you want to, how about telling us a little bit about yourself, Al, and your history here? And
Okay. How much time have y'all got? Al Williams. I was elected in 2002. Sworn in 2003. Prior to that, in 1975, I came here on Zell Miller's staff. So I just got here. But it's been great. I live in Liberty County on the coast of Georgia. Unfortunately, everybody can't live there, so I understand your fears. But all my life, I've lived on the coast. I've enjoyed it. I enjoyed all of my committees. And then one day, I got a former colonel as a chair. It's been tough ever since.
Al's my neighbor down there. I didn't say I actually live in Effingham County, and I represent part of Chatham County, Savannah, and Effingham County. My district, the third fastest growing district in the state, and I'm not sure exactly where the boundaries are now. I just lost 20,000 people in redistricting, but I appreciate being here, and we're going to try and make this as quick as we can, as I said. But if you've got something to say, we're not going to restrict anybody. I'd rather go over a little bit, and I think our committee members would rather go over a little bit today than have to come back tomorrow. So first off, we're going to call corrections. And if you would go right down the tracking sheet by number, and you have your choice whether you want to sit at the table or when you want to stand at the podium, whatever makes you feel comfortable.
Make sure you guys can hear me. Okay, good. We're going to go straight down the tracking sheet. So we got 19.5.1. 19.5.1. It's increased funds. Most of you heard this a few hours ago. The increased funds for physical health and pharmacy services. This increase is to support the new healthcare contract providers and mental health services statewide. This contract provides a more stable cost model and includes electronic health records system being utilized by physical, mental, and our pharmacy vendors, and that's to a tune of $12.2 million. Next is 19.8.1. It's in the state prisons program, and it's the reduction to reflect the closure of Georgia State Prison of $20.8 million. Tracking number 19.8.2 is $51.4 million for emergency repairs and upgrades to life safety and security systems and major maintenance and renovation projects statewide. That total recommendation for the state prison program is $30.6 million.
I know you've only been there about 30 days, but
19.
19. Well, what about the pharmaceuticals? You know, we had an issue up here a couple of years ago, and I remember I think it was hepatitis. I'm not sure which one, but the cure was like 27,000 for each individual, and then I think we had some new pharmaceutical that came on the horizon that went up to about 70,000, and they were trying to renegotiate that. Do you know, or?
Yes, with our new healthcare or new pharmacy vendor, they're actually using some non-340B medications for hepatitis C, so that cost has actually dropped dramatically. And I don't know, Randy, if you can tell us, you know, what the average might be.
It's around 20,000 per treatment. 84 tablets, one tablet a day for 84 days. Okay. We have any questions?
Just a comment on Commissioner Oliver. He just left one of the top 2 toughest jobs in state government to go to the other top 2 toughest job in state government. So that says a lot about the confidence that Governor Kemp has in him. So look forward to working with you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I didn't know if you want me to continue or we good.
Something that's not on the tracking sheet?
19.8.2 is our infrastructure recommendations.
Oh, okay.
That provides $51.4 million for special projects, 33 projects at 19 facilities. This is for emergency repairs that we talked about earlier, and this is for upgrades on our water systems at one location. And then really the biggest bulk of that is the $14.9 $9 million, almost $15 million, to upgrade our CCTV, perimeter fencing, locking and control systems, and fire alarms within some of the facilities. And then our major maintenance and renovation projects at $32.4 million to replace some of our boiler systems, lift station upgrades, and things that's critical mission to the facilities. And that total recommendation for that program is $51.4 million. And so our total recommendation for amended fiscal year 23 budget is $42.9 million. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, the board's lit up. We got a lot of questions here. I'm not even going to challenge you on the maintenance and I mean, you got so many different facilities, and I introduced one of your predecessors one time as the CEO of the largest gated community in the state. And
That's it.
It is a big job. It's probably big. I mean, 11,000 employees, 52,000 inmates. You know, I wish you the best. 28.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, I want to applaud you also. You come with high marks from Tim Ward. And anybody that can come with high marks, you must be a good one. Couple of questions. I'll start with one dealing with a local facility. I noticed in the in your 19.8.1 a lot of these upgrades. Can you tell me, is there any upgrades about dealing with a sewer system up at Whitworth Detention? And the reason I ask this, my city council members in Hartwell have questioned me. Hart County is building a new jail next to the prison out on that property. And they're going to try to, I think they've talked to y'all's engineers about running that through the prison's sewer system that corrections paid for years ago, the lift stations and all. City council members have told me that the prison itself is already overflowing, or that it's already over capacity to the city. Have y'all got anything planned on that to try to enhance or to fix that, to raise that up for a higher volume?
I'm going to let Chief of Staff Watson probably answer that.
Yeah, I know we've been working on the design. I have not seen any kind of estimates on what the cost would be, but we can look into that and reach back out to you.
Yeah, I'm just curious about that, since that deals with the local. Second question is Alto, which is close to several of us up there in northeast Georgia. Old facility, should have been tore down years ago, and y'all continue to keep it in operation as a female facility. My understanding is that y'all are fixing to deactivate that and keep the fire services there and transitional
Transitional center, fire services, packing plant,
is
right now our RSET program.
Is that imminent in the near future or sometime during the year, or?
It'll be probably, once we open up McRae, we're going to transition that female population down to McRae, and we're going to maintain, we're going to repurpose or remission Lee Arundel. And we're going to keep the fire service, like I said, the packing plant, RSAT, and the transitional beds, with hopes to expand the transitional beds there in the future. But the rough timeline, we're going to slowly dwindle that population down once we get McRae open, so we'll be within this calendar year.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna call by numbers. It's it's hard to recollect who's where. So number 23.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, Commissioner Oliver, I do applaud you. You did an awesome job at DJJ. As Chair of Juvenile Justice, we work together very closely, and I look forward to partnering with you through the public safety appropriations process. I'm just wondering why usually most of these major maintenance renovations are in the bond package, and I'm wondering why these are in supplemental appropriations rather than part of your bond package, and maybe you could speak to what might be in your bond package as well.
I'll defer to.
Yeah, my understanding is they funded it with they actually funded our capital repairs and maintenance in the 23 budget with cash. I think simply due to the fact that, you know, the state had some excess cash right now. And so the $42 million that they gave us originally at the start of the fiscal year, we had all that allocated by the end of July. Just because of the aging infrastructure, things are requiring repair quicker. And my assumption is the $51 million was in cash. Some of that's savings due to the closure of GSP, but then the rest simply because the state had the cash right now instead of incurring more liability. And then in the out year, you're going to see 26.2, I think, 26.8 million in bonds ongoing.
17.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions. I'll start with health. You mentioned hepatitis C, $20,000 per treatment, one tablet, 84 days. What's the number within the population that has that now, and are we undergoing efforts to screen, try to address this? Can you fill us in on those efforts?
If you want to come up and provide that update, that would be good.
Thank you. Yes, we actually started screening our patients for hepatitis C back in 2016. That's something we do at intake. And right now we have been treating those patients and go through completed treatment. We average around 250 completed treatments a year based on just the turnover of those particular inmates. But right now we estimate from our screenings that we have a little over 400 diagnosed patients in the population with diagnosed hepatitis C. Currently we're treating 89. And there's a protocol that's used by the gastroenterologist and hepatologists that treat those patients on a scale of severity. It's called phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. Phase 3s and 4s are treated, and so that's kind of the protocol that's used. So just because you're diagnosed, the severity of the disease may not lend itself to treatment. So it's based on the clinical oversight of the physicians that monitor that. But anybody that's referred for treatment is treated.
Okay. And do you have an understanding as to whether or not the transmission is largely happening after entry into the prison system as opposed to them coming into...
It's community acquired in the community on arrival.
On arrival,
Yeah.
okay. Are there efforts to screen on an annual basis after they're in the population?
We don't screen on a routine basis unless they're symptomatic, but we screen everybody on intake.
Okay. All right.
Everybody's screened on intake
Okay.
during diagnostics.
And then with respect to the violence issue, and earlier in the main room you talked about using technology to address violence, and I think everybody would agree that it should be a violence-free environment, both for the inmates and for the corrections officers, ideally. Can you fill us in on the efforts and what the technology looks like to help address that problem?
Yeah, and some of it is simple. As we laid out into our some of our maintenance and repairs is CCTV footage. Upgrading our camera systems. As everybody knows, with the staffing issues, and we'll make sure we put more cameras in places where we can't see, to have more eyes on those areas. And so some of those things are just as simple as that. Other is just trying to, like we talked about, our cell phone technology, to making sure that we're identifying the contraband cell phones, cutting those lines off, doing shakedowns, increasing those shakedowns. Just to kind of give a little context to that. Previous years, I think we were conducting full shakedowns anywhere between 40 to 50 full shakedowns across the state. Of course, COVID had a significant impact in that. Not able to get inside the prisons in the last couple of years due to that. But last year alone, we did 126. And we plan on keeping ramping that up to ensure that we're getting the cell phones out, the homemade weapons that are in there, and as well as using the technology, adding metal detectors, body scanners, things of that nature inside the prisons to make sure that we're scanning the offenders as they move through and in and out the system.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is, and I don't know if other members of the committee received similar correspondence, but throughout the summer I received a number of communications concerning extreme heat. I'm assuming that some of the infrastructure efforts will help to address that, but can you talk a little bit about that?
I could talk a little bit about that, and I'll probably defer to the staff to talk a little bit more. But of course, this committee and this body has heard over the years about our aging infrastructure. I think it's safe to say that probably the issues that you're talking about with the prisons are so old and antiquated, we don't have central heating and air inside those facilities. But unless anybody from the team has anything else to add to that.
Yeah, the dorms are not air conditioned for the most part. I will tell you, we do a significant push every year. We constantly are monitoring exhaust fans and making sure all ventilation is working. And then any dorms that do have air conditioning, if it goes down, we bring in temporary units. We do everything we can to keep things up and running. And the same during the winter time. Like when we knew there was cold weather a severe cold coming, we go ahead and get portable units. We're already doing checks well ahead of time. We do our boiler inspections months before winter gets here. Same with the air conditioners and chillers. We do everything we can preventively. But of course, if there's extreme heat in the summertime, that makes it harder because you're basically just using exhaust fans. And there are fans within the dorm too to keep air moving. What was that? Oh yeah. So we do additional ice calls is what Matt's talking about. So we make sure we put additional ice in the facility to keep the offenders cool.
I was going to ask you again about the pharmaceuticals. When the hepatitis, when they changed the pharmaceuticals, the cost analysis said something to the effect that if we utilized the new one, that it only took one treatment. I mean, 82 days or whatever it is, but one time. And it was 100% effective. The old system, they said it often took repeated treatments before, so essentially the cost would be about the same. Is that the case?
Well, actually, the cost has come significantly down from what you're referring to. The old interferon drugs that you're referring to, they failed. Right now, the cure rate, and I say cure rate, is about 96% for those treated. It's very good right now. And there are a number of drugs that treat hepatitis. Each one has a little unique variation the physician would order. So there are a number of drugs. Harboni, you may see those ads on television from time to time. That's one of many. Zepatier. But the physician would choose from that list of direct antivirals. That's what they're called, DAAs. And so they're very good at what they do, and they match the patient with the right drug and have a very good chance of curing the disease.
Thank you. Number 16.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions. The first one, certainly I was listening to, I know the old dorms are not air conditioned, and you know, there's a line of thought that, hey, make it as harsh as you can in there. Fact is, that causes tempers to flare. I'm sure you agree. When folk are overheated, then your officers really got to be on cue because anything can cause something to break out. Just wanted to mention that. But how long is it going to take? You've got a lot of repairs throughout the system. It's an ambiguous program. What's the completion date do you anticipate? You know,
I think with our aging infrastructure, I think it's going to be an ongoing project. As things continue to break, we're going to have to continue to fix and upgrade. Once we get new prisons built, I think that's going to kind of drive down that cost. But just the initial assessment, like I said, that 18 days that I've been here and meeting with the team, it's gonna be a continual effort to make sure that we maintain those facilities.
That's good. Got worried you down to 18 now. You were 19 a little earlier.
Well, today is 19 today. I'm still counting. Not counting the day fully.
Okay,
so.
Fine. Thank you.
We have any further questions from anybody on the committee? You want to say something?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hang on just a second.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The new facilities, are they going to have air conditioning and heat?
Yes.
Will it remedy this issue?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
GBI.
Good
Well,
afternoon.
Mr. Director, we welcome you aboard. I don't think I've ever had the occasion, but I read your resume, and you are very well trained and certainly have the academic credentials and experience. So I've worked with the GBI all my career. In fact, when I first started GBI and the State Patrol, when everybody was all in one agency, and I had an office where the crime lab used to be one time, and I remember the first time I walked through there, they had a burned body in the corner with they were trying to reassemble. So I'm very familiar with your crime lab problems. I know the cost factors. I know where the people are going, and we put in a lot of money last year to try and attract some forensic pathologists, and I think the last I heard there were 500 of them, around 500 of them in this country, and there are about 1,000 jobs. So whoever has the money and pays the most usually ends up with them, and they don't mind moving. And I'm from Savannah. It was in my district when we put the new crime lab in, and I worked hard to get it there, and they redistricted me out of it the last time, but I recently had the occasion to know that you don't have a medical examiner there, and I know you don't have one in Macon, and that's to the detriment of our society, and we want to do whatever we can to try and assist you in that endeavor.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate those words, and thank you and the committee members for having us here today to have a discussion. As you probably know, we don't have anything on the tracking sheet, but I would like to take just a couple of minutes and talk about some of our challenges at the GBI. First is to maintain appropriate staffing in critical skill areas, like you've alluded to with the medical examiner's office. When we look at our attrition rate with our science personnel, we see if we compare FY21 to FY22, the attrition rate was 7.6%. Now, that also includes retirements, but it doesn't lower it much. But one of the concerning points that I want to make is that when you look at employees that are separating, the majority is the 1 to 5 year employee. And as I stated earlier, we expend a lot of money trying to attract the talent, but it's nothing compared to the money invested in that employee. After we hire them, most of our science programs, after the person is hired, has to go through a training program, and that can last anywhere from 18 to 24 months. And you talked about the medical examiner's office. We understand that. Right now we have 19 authorized positions. Only 9 of them are filled. But the good news is we are going to have 3 medical examiners hopefully join the agency in July of 2023, but that'll still bring it down to 7. We're thinking outside the box, everything from, and what you said before, there's 1,500 medical examiner openings currently, and there's about 500 certified medical examiners in the United States. So we're thinking outside the box with things like a visa sponsorship program of luring certified personnel from outside the United States. We're looking at proof of concepts like physician's assistants, looking at technology. Also, we have a stipend, a location stipend for Macon. We'd like to extend that to Pooler. And also we're doing a better, I think, job of prioritizing to get the backlog down in a medical examiner's office. Another challenge is our workforce and infrastructure expansion. As we look at the expanding mission of the GBI, we see that increases the demand. We've got to have the capacity to meet that demand, to continue to put out a quality product, whether it be an investigation or whether it be some type of medical examiner exam or scientific testing. And just to kind of give you an understanding of how busy we are, again, I recited these numbers earlier this morning, but in FY22, the GBI conducted over 7,000 investigations. Child exploitation alone has increased 18% since FY21. Our forensics division, on the average, fills 110,000 plus requests each year. And if we look at our officer-involved shootings, which is one of the most emotional investigations that we can do as far as the citizens are concerned, we have seen a 12% increase from 21 to 22 in those calendar years. Also, we're experiencing a reduction of revenue collections because of the reduction of user fees. We're projecting that there's going to be a significant deficit, and we're working with OPB to continue to look at those numbers, examine, analyze those numbers to try to get some type of true amount that that deficit will be. And lastly, our technology. Almost every crime is technology-based. We have to maintain our investigative capabilities, but also our technology capabilities, because, you know, we use technology to interrogate and do forensics on other technology. And we've certainly got to continue to make sure we have the capabilities for law enforcement in the 21st century. With that, Mr. Chairman, committee members, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Well, you talk about user fees. I know that with the advent of constitutional carry, and then they no longer have to pay to have their go through GCIC and have their background checked. Was that a substantial loss for you? It was.
As I stated, we're still working with OPB,
Okay.
but it can be anywhere between $2 to $3 million, or maybe even a little more. And understand that right now user fees are used to fund, I think, 95 full-time positions and 6 part-time positions that we currently, but we still have vacancies also that they fund.
And the other question I had is last year after we put the budget out, it went over to the Senate and they added $975,000 in there specifically for medical examiners and a medical examiner in Macon. And since you haven't been able to hire any and that money's just sitting there, I was wondering if you were open to opening that money up for use across the state in the best manner that you see fit for medical examiners.
I have our Chief Financial Officer here, and she may be able to answer that question for you, sir.
We are using some of the funds from the vacancies as well as the new positions to do a couple of things. We have brought in part-time doctors. We have one in Pooler and one in Macon. And then we are also paying a supplement to headquarters doctors to travel to Pooler to help cover cases there. So we have been utilizing some of the funds for that purpose. I will provide Courtney with some calculations to talk about what we have utilized to date for that purpose.
And I know the Senate would have another shot at it if we opened that up. But you know, I know what you're dealing with, and I don't foresee an answer because I know all about the Army and where people are going, and you know, you double your salary and eliminate half your workload. People are gonna go. But we certainly care about, because in criminal activities, the state does much more than the federal government, and even in the military capacity. So we got to have medical examiners somehow, some way, and good scientific. And I'm sure the judge can back me up. In this day and time, with all the TV shows, if you don't have the evidence, and you don't, I mean, that 10-minute turnaround on DNA. Juries wonder what you're doing and whether or not you're actually doing things effectively. So.
Certainly, the dots have to be connected.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
We have any questions from the committee members? Open.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With respect to the medical examiner issue, recognizing that it's an annual issue and doesn't seem to be getting solved, medical education is very expensive. Would it be possible to potentially have some scholarships for medical examiners to obtain the necessary credential, and then in exchange for X years of service to the state, like those type of things? Have those been explored?
They have. I'll answer the first part of the question, and then I'll have Director Melvin give some information about our discussions with Mercer University. We have a fellowship program, as you know, and it seems to be something that strategically we can work toward, that's working. When I stated earlier that 3 medical examiners would hopefully be joining the GBI in July, 2 of them came from our fellowship program. So it looks like it's working. So we're trying to address the problem short term, like the PA proof of concept, but also strategically work toward what are some long-term final solutions for this. And I'll turn it over to Director Melvin to communicate his discussions with Mercer.
Yes, sir. The loan forgiveness and scholarships are 2 areas that we're very excited about. Loan forgiveness, of course, has been before the House before, but very recently Mercer University and the Bureau have come to an agreement that Mercer University is looking if they can get the appropriate funding to provide scholarships in an expedited medical program. The scholarship will be designed for students that will commit to working in forensic pathology for the state of Georgia. We are very optimistic about that, and that came up as of about 48 hours ago. But we're very excited about that potential. Awesome. Yes, sir.
Here. And then the second question is recognizing the challenges that you have in terms of the agency has with backlogs across different sectors within the agency. Can you quantify for us what that means in terms of prosecuting cases? Like, is that slowing down? We recognize, we hear from the courts that they're slowed down as well and have a backlog, but is the timeliness or the ability to test the evidence, do the examinations, is that slowing down prosecutions as well? And if so, can you give us a sense of how much?
I believe it is. Generally speaking, I'm sure it does impact, but we take each case on a case-by-case basis, and we're trying to do a better job of prioritizing. For instance, the legislative body and the governor approved, I think, somewhere around $800,000 in FY23, so we could actually outsource some of the testing. Now, when you look at our testing, the chemistry, the biology, and the firearms, that makes up about 93% of all of our tests. And I think last year we outsourced about 2,500 chemistry tests, trying to attack the backlog with the outsourcing, right? And with some unique things we're doing internally, and I think 123 ballistic tests were outsourced last year, so we appreciate that. But we are certainly working on and brainstorming solutions that could impact the backlog. And let's take the medical examiner's office again. When we talk about a priority, if it's a in custody death, an officer involved shooting an infant, child, or if there's a religious or military time frame, then we're trying to prioritize that. We're doing the same thing in the lab. And again, we work with our local and state partners very closely, and internally too with our investigators, to try to make sure that we meet time limits as much as possible.
I want to have a better understanding of just the time frames that we're dealing with. So say that there's an incident that happens today,
Mm-hmm.
and a piece of evidence, I don't care what context it's in, let's use firearm for a murder because that's serious and something that we'd want to address sort of quickly. What would be the time frame in which you can turn around the analysis on that? Is it months, weeks?
If it's a priority and we're expediting it, we'll try to have the results 45 to 90 days.
Okay.
But when you look at the backlog in firearms right now, if we didn't take another firearm in and
right.
we did not outsource it, it would take 10 months to get through the backlog. And so that's why we're constantly having to prioritize.
Okay. And last question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Are there any additional costs on the outsourcing, which I fully support, but with respect to chain of custody testimony within trials, is that an issue at all, or no?
We have not found that to be the case. And I think that when I say we, the agency did due diligence prior to doing that to make sure that we outsourced it to, number one, a reputable quality company, and that there would be no disruption of the chain of custody.
Okay. Thank you.
24.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What's the testing policy on marijuana now? Because I'm hearing that from some of my local officers.
Okay, Director Melvin.
Yes, sir. Back in July of last year, the crime lab issued a new bulletin, and what it did was it allowed us to focus our testing on what would be appropriate testing. And to give you all the specific answer to it, if I am found with a hypodermic needle, I could be charged with possession of a drug-related object, which is a misdemeanor. But what has happened time and time again is that prosecutors have wanted the hypodermic needle tested for whatever chemicals on there, if it's meth, if it's coke. so that it can be charged as a felony possession of cocaine.
Right.
We have said, in order to control the backlog, instead of doing that, I mean, we can make exceptional circumstances, but you're going to have to charge as a possession of a drug-related object. Make it the misdemeanor that the statute envisioned so that we can be freed up to test the larger, more serious cases. That's on the drug-related objects. On the marijuana-related objects, the oils of marijuana, it doesn't matter what the purity is. And what we were getting was to quantify the purity amount when it's qualitatively proven to be marijuana. So we're not doing the purity anymore because you don't need the purity. We are doing the qualitative testing so that it can be prosecuted as possession.
And is there a minimum amount? Does it have to be felony level or?
Yes, sir. It'll be like 0.3% purity. And when we can say it's over 3% purity, we're not going to say it's 0.8, 0.9 because that's not necessary. It's sufficient to say it's over 0.3% purity, sir.
And as to the misdemeanor cases of any of these drugs, how do local agencies get those tested? I mean, used to the officer in a marijuana case could test it and testify about it in court, and I think the Supreme Court stopped us from doing that. So what's the cure for that now? Because it's still a crime, misdemeanor possession.
Yes, sir.
So is
for those items that we don't test, they are given back to the prosecutor's office, who can make a decision whether or not to send it out to one of the outside laboratories like NMS laboratory to proceed on the testing like that. But again, Representative, what it is more for the drug-related objects as opposed to the THC testing itself.
right.
Okay.
But what I'm hearing from home is that they're not prosecuting
And
marijuana.
that's a choice of the prosecutor as opposed to anything that the GBIs provide them. They have the option, but it's going to fall on them. If it's a drug-related object and they want to pursue a felony, they have to send it off for testing. With the exception, sir, that if they call us, if it's a special case, if it's a death penalty case, if it's an officer-involved shooting, we'll test everything. All you have to do is call and ask.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions from the committee members? Okay, we appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. CJCC, Director Neal. Over the years, we've kind of swapped places. He used to be up here, and I used to be down there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I remember how polite and kind I was to you in those days. It's an honor always to come before my former colleagues. I appreciate you all so much and appreciate the work you do. Our tracking sheet, page 12, we are 30.6, 30.7, and 30.8, and you will see that there is no change reflected in any of those three.
Well, we have a concern about the crime. I've been told that we have a problem with the Crime Victims Emergency Fund is insufficient and that it may run out. And I see it as a very positive thing. People that are victims of crime that affect their fiscal status certainly ought to be able to recoup it in some fashion. And could you give us a little bit of background on that? Or?
Mr. Chairman, I too believe that the Crime Victims Emergency Fund is a very important part of what we do as a state. We work very diligently to take care of those victims of crime who file applications with our office. By the way, I have with me my Deputy Director, Stephen Hatfield, my CFO, Nathan Branscombe. I also have Aisha Ford, who is the Director of our Crime Victims Comp Fund, and a couple of other of my staff members with me here today. We have noticed over the last several years the challenges within the Crime Victims Emergency Fund, and we've done a couple of things to try to address that. We've made some internal changes to reduce our operational expenditures. Last year, you may remember, we passed a workers' compensation table for reimbursement on medical expenses, and along with that, a payment in full, so that as we get medical bills in going forward, we'll be paying, instead of paying the bill in its entirety, we'll pay it on a workers' comp fee schedule. And any provider that receives payment, that they will, in receiving that payment, acknowledge that that is payment in full, and the victims will be protected from them coming after them for future expenditures. That became effective July the 1st. We're not really seeing any savings from that yet. We anticipate savings of up to a couple $1 million once we are fully into just those workers' comp. As you know, probably you can imagine it takes a little bit of time for claims to come in after a victimization. So we're still processing a lot of medical claims on victimizations that happened prior to July 1 of last year. Those claims remain open until we reach the cap. So sometimes it's years after that we're still paying bills on those claims. So it'll be some time before we get to full realization of the savings there. One of the things that concerns us a little bit is the $5,000 raise for employees last year was not funded for any of our employees in the Victims Comp Division because they are being paid out of the Crime Victims Comp Fund. So about over $400,000 additional is now coming out of the comp fund as a result of that. The proposed $2,000 this year also is not being funded. So another $168,000 or so will be coming out this next year. So those two raises are impacting our fund by about $700,000 a year in additional expenditures. Since COVID, and the primary revenue source that we have for our Crime Victims Emergency Fund is probation fees. Since the onset of COVID, our probation fees collections are down about $24 million. That is a significant decrease in the amount of revenues coming into the program. The governor last year recommended, and you all added to the amount recommended by the governor, an infusion in to our Crime Victims Comp Fund, emergency fund of $8 million. We appreciate that. That bought us some time, but we're still in a position, we believe, with the fund balance where it is now, with those additional expenditures that are coming out as a result of those unfunded raises, and the continued decrease of probation fees. And at this point, we believe that may not ever recover. The number of people on probation is significantly lower than it was. We don't anticipate those revenues will ever fully recover. So we are in a position where we feel like there is a need for an infusion, and we requested that. OPB believes that infusion can wait until next year. I certainly respect their opinion. I know that they're looking at a lot of things, not just at CJCC. We're looking primarily at CJCC's needs. They're looking at statewide needs, and I respect that opinion. But we do believe that the Crime Victims Emergency Fund is in a pretty critical place at this time.
Number 16.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, my friend.
I know that you said it can wait till next year, but what are you going to do until next year with that big gap?
We'll continue to eat up the reserves in the fund. The way the Crime Victims Emergency Fund operates is pretty complex, and it's a little bit difficult to understand. But we pay claims out of the state portion, which is the Crime Victim Emergency Fund, primarily probation fees. There's also some DUI fees and some restitution recovery. We have hired a restitution recovery officer to try to get more restitution. We spent time in front of the district attorneys and are scheduled to be in front of the judges to make sure they understand the importance of seeking restitution. So there are some additional revenues that come in, but obviously when you're losing $5 or $6 million a year in revenues that you have typically counted on, it makes a tremendous impact. We spend around $12 million a year in those state Crime Victims Emergency Funds. We are able to receive back from the federal government a percentage of that to make that Crime Victims Emergency Fund whole. We expend about $20 million a year for crime victims across the state. One of the concerns that we have as we spend down the fund throughout the course of this year is if we get to the place that, for example, if there's anything unexpected that happens, if we have a mass casualty, for example, which could create a load on the Crime Victims Emergency Fund, if the federal government is slow on getting their grant out to us at the end of the year, which has happened in the past, and certainly we fear with Republicans and Democrats both in control of a part of the federal government, we fear that there could be some financing issues as we wrap up this year that could cause those grant funds to be delayed. A delay of receiving the federal grant could create an issue for us as well. Another issue, if we wait too long, is if we spend down our state funds too significantly, so that next year, for example, we're now primarily spending federal funds. We at that point won't have the state funds to be able to go to the federal government and get the federal grant, because that's a match. I think it's 75% of what we spend we get back from the federal government. If we spend down our state funds so that we're not spending a sufficient amount of state funds to bring those federal dollars in, that creates additional strain on the program as well. So,
quick follow-up. Let me just ask you this. Say this. This is directed toward the General Assembly and the Congress. You know, this is an issue that's very popular when you're running. Victims.
mm-hmm.
We need to do for the victims. But it seems to lose its appeal and colorfulness once the election's over. I think it is extremely important, and I would hate to see us not be able to draw down because we don't have state matching funds and some of the other pitfalls. I think it's important when a person's a victim of crime that there's some way to help them, and I think we need to raise its profile just a little bit. The average person doesn't even know about this.
I think I agree with you, and I think the legislature and the governor's office have shown that commitment, and we appreciate the commitment they have shown. One of the things that we have done over the last several years is we've worked hard at marketing the program to make sure that that people are aware of. You're right, there are a lot of people that aren't aware of the Crime Victims Emergency Fund and what's available. So we've worked hard to try to market that. We have victim advocates across the state that work the district attorney's office and sexual assault centers and domestic violence shelters, child advocacy centers. Those victim advocates work with victims to try to point them to the Crime Victims Emergency Fund. And as a result of that, our expenditures have increased over the last 6 or 8 or 10 years. And we do believe that there are still those out there that don't know about, and we still need to be working to do a better job of making sure that all victims understand the programs there and what their rights are. And I appreciate the commitment of the legislature and the governor's office to making sure that's available.
All right, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Director Neal.
Representative.
Appreciate your hard work and that of your team, and I've enjoyed working with you and your team for many years. I want to ask you about a couple of things. I want to start with the sexual assault kit tracking system,
Mm-hmm.
which I understand is online. Can you give us an overview of how that's working?
Absolutely. We provided a report just a week or so ago to the legislature. The sexual assault kit tracking system is up and running. It is being utilized by a significant percentage of those individuals that need to be inputting into the system. We have a report with all the details. I don't know if you have that. If any of you don't have that, if you'll let us know, we'll make sure that you get it. I think we probably have submitted it to at least last year's committee. The new members may not have it yet. What this does, and we're real excited about this. As soon as a kit is utilized, it is loaded into the system ideally, and we're able to track that system in the victim or through the system, and the victim's able to track that kit through the system as well. So we're really excited about where we are. We have identified some areas where we believe that we need additional training. Our team has been working hard to make sure that everybody's properly trained in how to utilize the system. We'll continue to do that, and what we see in this report has given us some areas where we know that we need to work a little bit harder at educating, and we'll continue to do that as we go forward. But we're really excited about this. We think this is a huge step forward for the state of Georgia and for victims in Georgia, and we appreciate your all's support in helping us get to the place that we are with the sexual assault kit tracking system.
Thank you. That's very encouraging. And With that, I'd like to ask about sexual assault nurse examiners, also known as SANEs, because they play a key role in taking the evidence. My understanding is that there have been efforts or proposals to try to expand the number of SANEs that we have across the state. Can you give us a little update on that as well?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking about that. We have a statewide SANE coordinator in our office who is phenomenal, and she's a nationally recognized expert that speaks at national conferences and has done a tremendous job here in the state of Georgia in helping to develop out the program within the state. We have some programs that are doing very well with SANE nurses, but for the most part, just about every one of our programs around the state has reported to us that there's a shortage in SANE nurses. They're just not available. One of the things that we did request in the budget is we requested some funding to provide a SANE nurse for see if I can 24 SANE coordinators around the state to help us build out those programs around the state, so that if an individual reports as a victim of a sexual assault, they'll receive the proper examination from the very beginning. It is important that they are seen by somebody that is trained as a sexual assault nurse examiner, not just someone that has medical training, but specific training as a sexual assault nurse examiner. That's important for law enforcement. It's important for the district attorneys, the prosecuting attorneys. If there's going to be a proper case built against an offender, that sexual assault nurse examiner is a very important component in that. So we did request some funds for that. They were not included, but we do think it's important for this program to be built out around the state.
Okay. And so if we being the General Assembly were interested in that, we would have to add those funds back in, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
23.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As somebody who used to work with victims, obviously the emergency fund running out is of great concern to me. Just kind of walk back some of the numbers. You said that it cost $400,000 for the personnel raises at $5,000 per. How many personnel is that?
Is the podium on? Yes.
Yep.
Good afternoon. I'm Nathan Branscombe, the CFO for CJCC. So that number, just a little over $400,000, is for 48 FTE. 37 of those are 100% dedicated to the Crime Victims Compensation Program. That's everything from your intake personnel, your claims investigators, your claims processors, the individuals processing forensic medical exams, forensic interviews, all of the different functions within that program. And then the remaining 11 is portional salaries that hits that, where it's the remaining 11 are the IT, executive, administrative overhead, financial overhead to process through the work of the program.
Okay. I'm not going to bog the committee down, but I look forward to kind of working through some of those numbers with the emergency fund, as we walk through the process.
Absolutely.
And for somebody that didn't have anything on the amended budget, you sure got to answer a lot of questions. And I want one quick update. I worked at CJCC for 5 years, and about 2 years ago, I guess it was, we had a crisis in the women's and children's shelters across the state. The federal government came through with a big bond, a big package, and funded a lot. And then as they pulled it away, some of the shelters had utilized that money to build facilities and hire more people, and we got into pretty good dire straits. And I didn't hear so much about it last year. What's the status on that?
So the VOCA, so just as our Crime Victim Emergency Fund in the state is in a difficult spot, the Federal Crime Victims Emergency Fund, which is where the VOCA Victims of Crime Act dollars come from, the Crime Victims Emergency Fund right now there is less money in the fund than has been obligated for this fiscal year. So the Crime Victims Emergency Fund is about to be zeroed out. There was a VOCA fix that was passed last year, and a lot of people talked about this VOCA fix and how excited they were about the VOCA fix. I think that's an inappropriate name for it. This was a VOCA Band-Aid, and whether it ends up being a fix or not, we'll see, but at the very best, it's going to be years down the road before it fixes VOCA. We have seen tremendous cuts in our VOCA allocation over the last 4 years or so. We just learned today what kind of the range that our VOCA allocation will be this coming year. It will be a cut from last year once again. Probably we anticipate about 39 or 40 million. We are in a position to where those domestic violence shelters and sexual assault centers and child advocacy centers and court-appointed special advocates and the VWAP program and the district attorney's offices, all of those receive a significant amount of VOCA funds. And with this next VOCA award, we're certainly in a position to where we're going to have to make cuts to those programs. We have cut our VOCA program. We have cut our VOCA funding for the last couple of years. We were able to supplement with the Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Fund of about $14 million 2 years ago. We received ARPA funds last year. We still have some of those ARPA funds available, so that'll kind of cushion the cut a little bit. But those ARPA funds go away after this coming year, and we're in a position if the federal government doesn't, to make sure everybody understands, this isn't a decision that Congress has made that we're just going to reduce funding. This is a Crime Victims Emergency Fund on a federal level, which also is funded. It is funded by white-collar crime fines. Unless that Crime Victims Emergency Fund begins to rebuild, the federal government is not in a position to allocate more money unless they begin appropriating. My understanding is, in conversations with people on the Hill, is they're not real interested in appropriating for the Crime Victims Emergency Fund. But we'll see what happens if that fund does indeed zero out this year, how they address it going forward. But there's some definite possibilities that these cuts that we'll see this year will be the beginning of the cuts that may be coming over the next few years. It's really hard to say at this point. We continue to work hard to find supplemental funding. We've been able to do that the last couple of years. We continue to do that. Our team is looking everywhere they can to find opportunities to bring in additional funds for our partners around the state to continue to provide the services that our victims need.
Thank you. Appreciate all you do. And it concerns me. I visit most of these shelters around the state during my time there, and I don't think there's anything more depressing than to see a woman with her children in there that, as a result of violence or other issues, her future is pretty dim. And if we can't take care of them, I don't know who will.
Right.
But
I
thank
agree.
you for what you do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate you all.
Department of Law. Mr. Attorney General.
Mr. Chairman.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Great to be with you. Good to see the members of the committee, and saw many of y'all yesterday as well. Mr. Chairman, I'll just jump right into our amended request. As I mentioned yesterday, it is critical to us meeting the needs of our budget. It's to address the COLA shortfall as well as the ERS shortfall. We are asking for $633,445 to address the COLA shortfall. We're asking for $174,253 to address the ERS shortfall. It's an $807,698 total. As we mentioned yesterday, we're requesting both items to address the difference in amount appropriated in FY23 and the actual cost of these items to our agency. And I mentioned yesterday, these were obviously statewide changes in the 23 budget for the $5,000 COLA appropriation. The law department was appropriated $1,476,386, while the actual cost to administer the adjustment is $2,109,831. And for the ERS employer contribution appropriation, the law department was appropriated $1,044,781, while the actual cost to administer the adjustment is $1,219,034. And our numbers are based on the actual cost to the law program, as I mentioned, for our 100% state-funded employees. But as I mentioned yesterday, I'm coming with a problem, or I'm coming with an ask, but also with a revenue source. And as we mentioned, that we have that revenue that we send to every year we have revenue that we send to the Treasury for this committee to appropriate, and which can be used to pay for our request. Over the prior 6 fiscal years since I've been Attorney General, we've brought in on average of just over $14 million to send to the state treasury through our consumer protection efforts. And that doesn't include the opioid settlement that everybody saw that the state had entered into. It doesn't include any punitive damages cases, but it is a little over $14 million, and this is money that our office generates each year. The state doesn't plan for, but we bring in. And as I mentioned yesterday as well, just in the first 6 months of FY23, we've actually brought in $22.4 million to the Treasury. So again, we're asking for $807,698 out of that $22.4 million, if you would agree to appropriate that back to us. And again, obviously today we're talking about the amended, but we'll have to ask for this as well in the FY24 budget. And I would truly appreciate your consideration, as this is critical to us meeting the needs of our budget. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will answer any questions anyone may have.
Apparently we don't have any questions. You're very thorough.
And I was trying to be efficient, sir.
Well, I think when you contribute more money than you take away, you are efficient.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And we're always happy to answer any questions anyone else may have at any time.
Okay, we appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks to the committee, subcommittee as well.
Department of Public Safety. Good to see you again, Colonel. You did a great job today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll just jump right into ours, Mr. Chairman. For amended fiscal year 23, we have 2 items for discussion, 2 items on the governor's recommendation. You'll find ours on page 17 on the tracking sheet. We support and appreciate the governor's 2 recommendations on line 3941 in field offices and services. We support the governor's amended fiscal 23 recommendation for 10 additional K-9s. We found that our K-9 program is a very valuable resource to our agency. We currently have 30 K-9s, and we've got 8 additional ones currently in training. So we're hoping to expand that, continue to expand that program. On line 3942, we support the governor's recommendation for $30.3 million to procure and complete a new statewide radio system, as we discussed this morning. Through our analysis and the recommendation of OPB, we think the one-time funds can achieve a solution for us on a statewide radio system. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll take any questions that you may have.
And I would just like to say, you know, I dealt with this 15 years ago, and I just can't imagine that the technology costs have come down, because we were talking $220, $230, $240 million to accomplish this, and I can't believe that we could actually do it now for $30 million. So, yes, kudos. Number 28.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Carl, could you tell us a little bit about where y'all at on our communication system? And the reason I'm asking the question, when I chaired this committee back in '98, we were still talking about interoperability of the radio systems, and I don't even know where y'all are today. I know that a lot of the officers still use cell phones and such as that, so where are y'all at right now, and what's the goal
we still have the same radio system that we've had for the last 30 years. That's where we're at.
So there
it's,
hadn't been any progress made
there's been
since.
no change, no real updates to it.
What are the goals that y'all are trying to? Are y'all trying to get to the point where we actually have a radio system?
Yes, sir.
Statewide.
That's right. Yes, sir. We're trying to get to that point, and we're also just trying to get to the point where we've got a lot of dead space across the state where our radio system just does not work. And that's why you hear troopers talking about they have to call in on a cell phone, or many troopers have 2 and 3 radios in their car where they have to switch and use a county radio system to communicate on.
You have to relay off the back.
So we're trying to get it to where we have one radio in a car and they can literally talk. If a trooper leaves Valdosta and he's in a pursuit and he's traveling up I-75, he can continue to talk to his home post of Valdosta if that is so needed.
So dealing with the dead spots throughout the state, the new system is a technology there now that we can do a unified system statewide.
That is my understanding, yes, sir.
The $30 million that's been asked for, is this just the starting point?
This is the this is to fund the project, to get it in place, and then there'll be a $2 million reoccurring maintenance cost each year.
I'm like the chairman back 24 years ago when I was chairing this. At that time, we were looking at $90 to $100 million plus.
Right.
And I'm
This
kind
is based off
of
of
kind of
LTE.
amazed at the lower figure that we're seeing. That might be the only thing that technology has come down in the price.
Right. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And a lot of those areas are up your way in the mountains where the radio system doesn't work very effectively.
Yeah. Yeah.
20.
My colleague just made a comment. If we wait another 5 years, it might drop another $10 million.
We'd appreciate your consideration of not looking at that in that direction.
Is this for the bidding? Have y'all already let out bids or got tentative?
No, sir.
So y'all got a figure somewhere. Y'all came up with this figure. Is this tentative from the folks who are y'all dealing with? Or
well, we've looked at essentially two systems, and I was not familiar with one of the systems, but one of the systems is using Motorola technology, which is a system that is in place in some states, and it's based off of LMR. And then the other system that we're looking at is Southern Link, and Southern Link, as you know, has a pretty substantial infrastructure in our state already. So there's existing infrastructure that it will be utilized for this particular system. And LTE, and I can have Lieutenant come up if you want to. Why don't you come up? Have my communications director. He can talk a little bit more about the system specifically.
Yes, sir. So when we looked at the two different proposals, as the Colonel stated, one of them was basically the big comparison between option 1 and option 2 was option 1 was the state of Georgia spend the money to build our own infrastructure and to hire new employees to maintain that new infrastructure, which is what, Colonel, that drives up that cost. Whereas option B, the proposal we looked at, was utilizing the infrastructure that's already in place in our state today. And that was the big item. To the trooper or the officer that utilizes the system, both feel the same, they function the same, they operate the same. The difference is the cost to the state of Georgia. And option A, again, includes us building our own infrastructure and maintaining our own infrastructure. And option B, that you see numbers for, is utilizing infrastructure that's already in place in the state today, and we don't have to hire employees and we don't have to maintain that system.
That is all it.
Very good.
Number 26.
Thank you, Chairman. This may be out of line for another agency, but would this also help the cross agencies such as DNR, or they have to come with their proposal? But if they did, would it also mesh easily? Because I know that's a big problem they have as well. Because they need to communicate with y'all as well as the locals.
So also DNR, you see in their budget, I won't speak for them, but they, we basically will carry the numbers that you see are the biggest burden of the cost to get it up and going. The cost for other agencies to come
Would just
on
be
board-
add-ons. Okay, so locals as well as counties, cities.
Right, that's
Okay.
the blessing in it is locals, the local
That's great.
sheriff's office, local PD can, they're already buying equipment, no matter which proposal the state uses, the locals will buy radio equipment as they upgrade. If, obviously them buying a particular type of equipment to join the proposed radio system is a very cost-effective solution for them to gain access to a very sophisticated statewide system.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Chairman.
So just a short question, then what we're really looking at is finally getting to a position of interoperability of communications with other agencies.
Yes, sir. It's literally, and if you're familiar with the radio technology out here in our state, because there never has been a statewide system, small counties that couldn't afford a sophisticated system like Atlanta or the CGAR network down on the coast, they've had to buy substandard systems. The problem with that is it works for their city, but when a catastrophe happens, nobody that comes in to provide assistance to them can communicate with them. But with the new system, it solves that. So one agency can speak to another agency.
Very good.
25.
Yes, the 30 million is the number for building the system out, and the 2 million, as you said, is an ongoing cost. Okay. Yeah, 12 years ago, I oversaw putting a system in this. I assume we're talking an 800 megahertz system, P25 compliant.
It's utilizing LTE technology. Now it still falls in the 800 megahertz spectrum.
Okay.
It's just using on the tower instead of a trunking system setup. It's a LTE setup.
Yeah, in the one county, we were right at $30 million just to do the project 12 years ago. So it amazes me that you're able to do this with that 12 years later for that much less. Yes.
We've heard that in our studies around the state and talking to system managers. That was really what helped us drive this location, is people that have invested the tens of millions of dollars into their county system look to go, man, wouldn't that be nice that we could have had the same outcome for a fraction of the cost?
Yeah, all right, thank you.
23.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is completely off topic, but with the additional the canine officers, as somebody who is providing a retirement home for a canine, for a retired canine, do y'all have a program for your retired canines, or what happens to those canines?
We do. We allow the handler to adopt that canine because he's typically spends his career, his life with that family, so we always give the officers the option of keeping them, and every single one of them has always kept them.
Okay, all right, thank
you.
you.
Once we retire.
21.
On the radio system again, how secure is one over the other? You said one of the infrastructure is already in place, and the other one we'd have to do. Are both of them secure as far as?
Well, that was one of the benefits, sir, and the LT option was utilizing. The backbone of it will be Southern Link, which is owned by a Southern company. So that grid or that technology that they use to communicate, that controls the power grid and that communicates about the nuclear plant, that's part of the reason why that company, why Southern Link had to be built, was because the other providers of cellular data and voice communications did not meet the security systems that need to be in place to meet their requirements, because they have to talk about the nuclear power plant and all that. So there's tons of encryption on the LTE side of it as well. So we feel real confident about the security of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
17.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel Wright, appreciating the radio system is around 30 million, and then annual maintenance is 2 million, all of which I fully support. But do you have a sense of the shelf life of this new product? In other words, what would be the capital investment? Is it another 30 million 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Can you give us any sense of that?
Yeah, no, that's the good thing about, in our opinion, the good thing about going this route is as technology changes and as technology progresses, we would be subscribers of someone who is paying the maintenance to upgrade those towers, to upgrade the network, so they are bearing the cost. And again, because of the job and the reason why Southern Links Network was created and their necessity to stay up to date with technology for security reasons, we get the benefit of it at no additional cost.
So it should be long-term?
Correct. It is correct.
Al?
I'm glad I don't sit any further down this table, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I didn't hear that.
I've got, thank you, Representative Ballinger, because she got one answer. I was interested in one with about 10,000 miles, a little warranty left on him, with one of those Ren 1010 lookalikes, but looks like it's an inside straight, so we'll move on to the next question. You know, the thing about, I've heard this discussion for 20 years now, about 4 years after Representative Powell was chairman. This radio system has been talked about. A couple of years down the road, it gets hot, then it dies down, then it comes back. I'm absolutely baffled that 11 million citizens, with the kind of rural roads we have, you can run from Bryan County down to Camden County and nothing flat, and we don't have a connecting radio system. It's time that the state go ahead and do what needs to be done to get this thing built out, and we hadn't even talked about an RFP yet. I think we got to move forward on it. But my big question is, I know Southern Links hometown folk, but have they got any statewide system set up that we can judge this by?
Yeah, I can talk about what we have been doing a trial study with them, testing the technology. And we have tested it literally statewide from one quarter to the next, from the coast all the way to the mountains of North Georgia. And because of the technology that's in the radios that's slightly different than what your standard cell phone will have, is we have been thoroughly impressed with the outcome of the product.
But my question, and I understand, and that's really good. I'm just wondering, you know, what's their experience on setting up and running a statewide system? I'd like to know, let's say they did it in Utah. We can call Utah and say, how has it worked for you the last 4, 5, 6 years? Where is it that I can call, or this committee or any member can call and find out how it looks? I'm just trying to see, because it does help. Like when I get ready to buy a car, I like to look at Consumer Reports and see what Harry Blow said about it when it was real cold or something like that.
Yes, sir. So, two sides of that coin. One is there is no currently a statewide LTE system in place. So this would be cutting edge technology. And so instead of Georgia being one of the last states in the nation that doesn't have a statewide system, my opinion is I feel like we moved to the front of the pack and we're finally stepping into cutting edge technology with what we're doing. The second, though, is our agency has a long-standing relationship with Southern Link as our backup source of communication. So in essence, we have used them when hurricanes come through and it takes down our current VHF radio platform and other cellular providers. We have always consistently been able to rely upon our Southern Link partners for communications in the moment of crisis, and that's been from one side of the state to the other. So the essence of what we're trying to do as a statewide radio system partially is a new concept, but we're really just taking what we've been doing over the past several years and expanding it. And again, our experience as an agency has been very positive with that.
It's very interesting. Well, Colonel, if you have a handler that falls out and can't take his animal with him, think about the friends and family rate and let's put him on the market. Okay.
Yes, sir.
No further questions? Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank y'all.
Office of Highway Safety.
I hope he left us some money.
It'll probably be near the end.
Mr. Chairman, we do have a handout.
I don't have it printed out.
I don't see that you're asking for any money here on the sheet.
We got a little bit of a surprise. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, board, committee members, for allowing me to be here today to present. It's just a small request of additional funds to assist us in our mission statement, which is to eliminate crashes, injuries, and fatalities on the Georgia roadways. And today I have with me my finance director, Ms. Laura Bolander, who's very familiar with what we're doing. In order to successfully implement our planning and programs for the remaining of FY22, the amended budget, we're requesting about $128,000 to meet that need. And the bulk of that request is due to the travel. If you can reference your travel sheet, I believe it's number 4, page 4?
3.
Page 3. The lockdown due to COVID assisted us in reducing our travel, and also we met the budgetary cuts that was requested by Governor Brian Kemp. The old FAST monies has been depleted. We just began to go into the new bill money from NHTSA, which is requiring the state of Georgia to expand our focus in the underserved communities and develop new partners to address the rise in the crashes, injuries, and fatalities on the roadway. The Georgia's Office of Governors of Highway Safety has been chosen by NHTSA as a pilot state to lead this technical assistance program. With this award, we will need to expand the travel throughout the state so that we can build and create new partnerships as we address the rise in these fatalities. With that said, we need an additional staff member. We have been, believe we'll receive over about $40 million for the next 4 years, and we dearly need some assistance when it comes to being able to disperse those monies. With that said, I would allow, if you will, Ms. Bolander to explain a little bit more about that.
Hello. So I'm going to talk about the need for the additional staff member or position in finance. So we had our workshop last week where we were going over all of our grant qualifications and the applications for new grantees. And we had over 70 in attendance. So even if we booked half of those, so if we had 35, that's a workload that we would add to what we already have, about 110 grantees. So we would need to have another staff member on board as an analyst to do what we need to do when paying those claims and approving those claims and meeting all the different deadlines that we have, both federal and state. So that is and it's outlined in this pamphlet here about the additional staff member. And then to further explain the need for travel, as the director said, we are going to be ramping up and getting out there on the roads and doing more within the communities to bring awareness, to educate them, to to include them. So we have this NHTSA program where we're going to actually go to them and ask them to be partners with us and try to come up with solutions if they're having a problem in their area. And we have some data we're going to be really digging into to find those areas that are having the worst in that in those problems with the fatalities. So as I explained, the P&A will be on this page right here. I think it's the 4th page, sorry. And so the proposed budget of $599,952, you'll see at the top. So far, in personnel, service, travel, and regular operating expenses, we've already spent $291 there, $291, $611, $66. So we have a remaining balance of $308, $340, $34. So that's halfway through the year. So if you project what's going to come about, that's your next page, and that's going to show you that you're starting with the 308. You're going to estimate your personnel service with the fringe and all at $299,500, travel at $88,500, other operating expenses at $5,000, and then that position I was just speaking about at $43,000 brings the remaining total that we would need for our budget at $436, and we only had $308. So that's where we are requesting that increase of $128 so that we can meet both of those needs. And successfully work toward our mission.
And Mr. Chairman, if I will, just for the board's edification, we receive about $20 million from NHTSA each year, and we disperse that through the grant application process. Like Ms. Bolander just alluded to, we have probably about 110 partners. If the workshop produced additional 35 more, you're talking about some additional staffing that's need to be required. And keep in mind, we dispersed this $20 million through a number of agencies for the state, whether it's public health, Department of Public Safety, the school system. So this money is in dire need for us to be able to get that $20 million out of the door. And when you look at the new bill money that's proposing that we've just began to unlock, you're talking about additional $10 million over the next 4 years. And hopefully we can get that money out the door so that we can help start turning the curve and reducing the numbers of these injuries and fatalities.
Would you explain, and I understand what you're talking about with travel and what's going on, but could you explain your operations of why travel is necessary part of it? And I may be wrong. Maybe everybody here understands it, but
Well, Colonel, thank you for that question. What myself and the deputy director do with the law enforcement side of the agency, we get out and we meet your local law enforcement agencies, whether it's with the sheriff, cities, or any public health people. We get out and we try to gain their trust and hopefully the partnership with them to address a cause in their community. We don't have the manpower. We're an agency of 28 staff members. We've got to partner with all different agencies of the state to meet this $11 million population that we have in the state of Georgia. We couldn't do it with 28 people. That's why it's imperative that we partner with the local sheriff and city and whomever we can.
okay. We have any questions? Well, you got off scot-free.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Let's take a quick 10-minute break and be back in here so we can finish on time, if you will. let's get back. We're about 25 minutes behind. I don't know. Judicial Council's last. I'm sure they hope we speed it up a little bit. Next up is the Court of Appeals.
Good afternoon. You always have to stop myself from saying Colonel, or I can say Colonel Chairman Hitchens when I first knew you were Colonel.
Well, you know I'm a smart aleck, and I don't know. Everybody asks me what to call me, and I always say, well, you can just call me sir for short.
Yes, sir.
I'm 75 years old. So.
I know that I believe Chairman Hitchens, you were there in the bigger meeting this morning and heard a lot of what I had to say, so
Yep.
I'll go get.
And I think you covered it very well.
I appreciate that. I'll cut right to the chase. First, want to certainly say thank you to the appropriations staff that have been kind to us. As for the amended budget, as I mentioned this morning, there is a figure, start with, as I said this morning, the good news, that $83,000 figure in 5.14 to increase our cyber insurance premiums can go away and be taken out.
Right.
We had a very favorable audit, and of course those audits determine what kind of rates you pay. We have implemented multi-factor authentication. As you've heard me for 2 years now say, what we've determined now is that our docket, our computers, that's our lifeblood, and without it, we can't go forward. So that can come out. I will go straight to what is the most consequential ask. As I mentioned this morning, for those of you who weren't there, our entire court, the central nervous system, is our docket system. That's how folks now electronically file briefs. That's how records get electronically transmitted. It is how we interface with the world. It's how the world's gone, of course. The code that we are using was written in 2009, and we have been informed, just like the Supreme Court, we have the same vendor, that it's time to rewrite it. We have asked for $1.8 million total. That is the total project cost to rewrite that code. We think, I heard a good question from one of the representatives, I can't remember if it was Representative Holcomb or Representative Williams, that I thought I would address when you were talking about communications, the shelf life. We think that's a 10 to 15 year, would give us a 10 to 15 year shelf life, provided, and here's another big, this is how lawyers answer questions, technology changes so rapidly and code changes so rapidly, but we think 10 to 15 years is what that would buy us. We asked for the reason that we just went ahead in the amended. What we were hearing from a budgetary standpoint was probably in Georgia that if you have these capital expenditures, one-time costs, that the phrase I think I used was make hay while the sun's shining right now and don't come back before you folks when things are much more critical and there's a downturn and we've put you in a tough position. And everything else, if you look at, there are a number of other features, you see that they are listed out to begin to close. You will see some specific items, for example, electronic transfer of cases between the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals, a figure that we could get that done. Opinion and order tracking, of course, what we learned in COVID is we actually, before COVID, circulated paper opinions. And we don't do that anymore because we had to change our ways, and none of us would wish COVID on anybody, but what we're determined to do is to take the lessons we learned and learn them. And what we learned is we can electronically, if we have the right security and we're serious about security, we can do a lot more electronically than we were doing, and we're doing it right now. Also to add jurisdictional review, and also for per curiam tracking, which is nothing I will bore you with the details with. But to close on that, as I mentioned this morning, the best way that we know of to enhance justice for everybody is when we reach the point in Georgia where if there's a case tried in former Judge Gunner's circuit and the parties are going to appeal, The infrastructure starts all the way down. The clerk can electronically upload electronic transcripts, digital evidence, and it's more of just transmitting it along a stream up to the appellate courts. The inordinate amount of delays, I'm sure Representative Gutter saw this, the judge is preparing transcripts, where we're reaching the point in Georgia where we're going to have real-time transcripts in the future. So that's what we are asking for, and we would appreciate your favorable consideration. Our FY22 money, I know that we were supposed to be prepared to talk a little bit about how we spent that. We spent virtually all of our enhancements on technology. We were able, I think it's important as I close, instead of speaking in vagaries, to give you concrete examples of what we can do with that. During COVID, we were able to do Zoom oral arguments. We've enhanced our courtroom. We've enhanced our capability. We did a CLE program on a civil rights era murder. Representative Powell's not here, but it was the murder of Colonel Penn in Madison County, the Ku Klux Klan murder. We were able to do that from our courtroom, live stream it to the world, and Colonel Penn's family was able to live stream in and participate. And it's all archived on our website. None of that would have been possible. It was a very moving day. I felt like it was a good day for Georgia, but without the money you appropriated us for upgrades, we wouldn't have been able to do something like that. That's just one small concrete example. And with that, I will be quiet and take the questions.
Well, I'm all for it, and I make the analogy to the medical community. I think we heard yesterday, you never see one doctor anymore. If something's wrong with you, you go to your practitioner, and he'll send you to a specialist, and he'll send you to somebody else. And the holdup there has always been the records moving from one to the other. Now that they can do that electronically in most places, I mean, he knows your whole background if you've kept with the same practitioner for years, and he can better adjust what he's going to do based on who you are and your past problems. And my analyst here and my administrative assistant are both pretty technologically capable, and my administrative assistant just graduated from Georgia Tech, and he tells me that they don't do this coding anymore, that they don't teach it in school, so nobody's going to understand it, except maybe this one guy that you talked about in Utah or Idaho or somewhere, and one day he's going to retire or die or something, and I don't know what you're going to do. So I'm all for it. It's rational.
Appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Rickman, I'm supportive of all the requests. I wanted to ask, I've been following the news about the suspended judge. Can you give us an update on that? I think the hearing was held and we're just waiting on the decision and what that means in terms of the future, because there's a cost there depending on how that goes.
Absolutely. Senior Judge Phipps came to our court to fill in. The trial concluded before the Judicial Qualifications Commission. They have to write up and render a decision. When that happens, by Georgia law, that is automatically reviewed by the Supreme Court for the final outcome. In the meantime, the cost associated, of course, is Judge Phipps' salary to fill in as a senior judge. I will be careful and not do anything to get ahead of any timeline as to what I think will happen. I do think it'll move with due haste. Does that answer your question? It does. Thank you. And I mentioned this morning, I didn't mention this before, but we lost Judge Clyde Reese at our court. To your point, we believe we are not going to need to pay another senior judge to fill in for Judge Reese until the governor makes that appointment. We've crunched the numbers. We can divide that work up, we feel. Without Judge Phipps, that would be a little bit daunting, but there won't be additional costs. We won't need to do that, we don't think.
Well, this has gone on for about 2 years now, and I understand, but we've continued to make that payment every year. Pretty expensive but it is what it is.
It is, and it's you point out a unique situation. There are not just a ton of senior appellate court judges out there. It's a very small group.
Number 24.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just curious, y'all still print books, right?
Yes, sir, through the reporter's office.
And from everything I'm hearing, we're all going to technology. When are y'all looking at maybe stopping that process?
We haven't had a serious discussion about it.
Do you have any idea how much that costs?
I do not. I can get those numbers for you, though, absolutely, from our reporter's office.
Because I know y'all send them out all over the state. I prefer books, but I'm old school. So I just wonder when that's going to stop, though. I see it coming.
Everything I do is digital. I get my book that's printed, and it's beautiful, and I put it up on my shelf, and I get to show my kids, but everything I do is digital, and to your point, I think it's coming for everything.
Yeah, if I have to research for a case, it's online.
You'd be amazed, not to waste your time, but when I got to the court, you'd be amazed. One of the things we're trying to do with digital evidence, I mentioned this morning, is reach the point where, like, if there's a body cam, when it's tendered, it's just uploaded and it's transmitted along. You'd be amazed how many times, for example, when a record's transmitted, we don't get the DVD with the body cam on it. We get a photocopy of the jacket of the DVD, and somehow it got left out. And we have to send the case back, and and so all this technology, sort of, that's the pie in the sky, is to get that going.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, that's the end of the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Prosecuting Attorneys Council.
Good afternoon, Colonel. Good afternoon, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here. With me is Chris Jones. Chris is our Chief Financial Officer. I will let him go over the budget numbers, and then we will be available to answer any questions. I know y'all are running a little bit behind, so we'll try to be as quick as possible. I guess I could just cut through the chase and say, give us all the money you got left, and we'll leave right now. That's not going to work, huh? We want to thank the budget officers for working with us. It's always a pleasure working with them, and appreciate all y'all do. Chris, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Starting on page 8 of the track sheet, first the Council of Superior Court Clerks, they don't have a request for their base program nor their special project program, so I'll jump right to the District Attorney's program. The first request, 8.3.1, is $1.8 million. This is really just a cleanup to requesting funds to reflect a change in the employees' retirement system employer contribution rates. And all this really is the differential that was not in the appropriation for the base budget. It's about 3.8% from when it changed in May that we didn't have privy to. 8.3.2, $107,000. This is just to align the appropriations bill with the DHS child support contract. This is not state funds. This is a contract just to align that. Jumping forward to the Prosecuting Attorneys Council program, line 8.4.1, $168,691. This is a similar request as in the DA's program for the employees' retirement system employer contribution rates. Just a lower amount because it's a smaller payroll.
We have any questions? Mr. Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With respect to the retention issues, and we dug down a little bit in terms of like starting salaries after 5 years, like those type of things. Is that fixed by this, or would that be an additional sum of money that would be needed? And it might be a bigger conversation for the big budget?
Yes, sir. That's a bigger conversation for the big budget. We have included in that, in our big budget, a step increase for the assistant DAs, and that's where we plan to address that issue. But that's not for the amended budget.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
But I do have the information you requested, and I'll be glad to hand that to you after this meeting.
Great. Thank you.
This money just includes what you got shortchanged last year. You and the Supreme Court and a couple other agencies didn't get all your money to give that $5,000 increase.
Yes, sir. I'll be
Right.
back to ask for a lot more in the big budget.
Well, we look forward to that.
Well, I look forward to it myself.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Public Defender Council.
Section 37.
30.
37.
Welcome.
Okay, good afternoon. And Chairman Hitchens, and to the rest of you, good afternoon and still Happy New Year. Public Defenders Council, just please allow me to just thank you for all you have done for us in the last 2 years. It's made a big difference from the raises and the cost of living adjustment. Today, we have one issue that we want to raise. Last year, you gave us HB 1391. It was unparalleled. It was exceptional. It gave us funding equity with the prosecutors, and we're very grateful for that. And we thank Mr. Skandalakis for helping us along the way, too. But it was not funded. When you look, and I'm going to let Terry explain to you what happened with the funding, but we've done everything possible to keep using our salary savings, to keep paying up CPDs, because we did not want to go from that level of excitement to getting the legislation passed to say we don't have money. So I'll pass it on to Terry Rayford to just explain why we're here and what we're asking. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Okay, for the CPD starting salary, it was $107,636. Then the governor gave the $5,000 increase, which increased it to $112,636. And then with the passing of HB 911, we gave the CPDs 3%. That brought it to $116,015. Then with the passing of HB 1391, we brought their salary to $127,437. So we used some of the money from HB 911 that gave $996,000, and that brought it to the 116. But the difference between that is $1,156,925, and that's the difference. So we're asking for July and September, which is $289,231. Because we instituted the increase October, and we're asking for the funding for the remaining months from February to June, which is $482,052.
Any questions? Judge?
I'm surprised that, because I was told that it was funded under 23, and y'all didn't get the funding.
No, we did not. And when you look at that funding line, it gave $996, but it gave it for both CPDs, CPDs and public defenders.
Mm-hmm.
So we used 3% of that to kind of advance them to where they were, and we've been using our salary savings to pay since October 1.
Help me remember, was it in and then taken out? Like when it got to the Senate, maybe? Is that what happened?
Yes.
Okay. Was that right at the end of the session? Part of that back and forth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, but we've been funding it with the little money we have, but now we're getting kind of broke.
I understand.
Mr. Holcomb?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What's the caseload, the average caseload that a public defender is carrying now?
It depends on, it varies. I just did an inquiry a few days ago, and it depends on what circuit. Some circuits are high, some are low, but it depends.
Can you give me a range?
So it's going
from
to
the
go
low to the high?
from, it's going to go from 124 to about 400. And some of those places where you have 400 is the places where we have not been able to find attorneys.
Holy cow. Okay, so for the low end of the spectrum, an attorney has a caseload of 124.
124.
And at the high end, over 400 cases.
But the 400 cases could be a mix of felonies and misdemeanors.
Okay.
So
That's still very, very heavy.
it's very
caseload.
high, and we're going to be meeting. I have just sent out an inquiry to 6 of the highest circuits. We're going to be meeting next week to look at what kind of creative approach we can use to bring it down. But the most issue is not funding. The issue is we still cannot find attorneys in some of those areas. And to that end, we have hired a recruitment person who's going to be using the mix of interns and provisional lawyers to go to those areas.
Okay.
So we'll be working on that.
What areas are most affected?
We have, where's Janice, please? We have from Alapaha to, it's about 6 areas that are most affected. The rural Georgia. So we have to do something really creative starting next week to see if we can get interns and provisional lawyers to go there and probably increase the fees a little bit more.
Okay, so it's sounds like it's primarily a rural area, which is that just a function that there aren't a lot of lawyers, period, in those areas?
There are not a lot of lawyers, and there are not a lawyers who would like to go there, especially from what I hear when I talk to young people. They're not. So we have to be, when we have increased the fee schedule, I don't know if you know about our fee schedule. Our fee schedule has gone up about 60%. For juveniles, it's gone up maybe about 200%, because we've gone from 350 to, it was 350 when I came, now it's 1,500. And for the felonies, we've gone to 7,500 or even more because we pay some cost. So we're increasing. The more we increase, the more we're seeing some results in some places, but not as much as I would love to see. And that's still ruling from the effects of the Great Resignation. So we're working on it. I can give you some more documents later on to give you specifics as to what we have.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Justice Boggs, you came in just at the right time. You're next. Georgia Supreme Court.
Well, that's good timing, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for accommodating me, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present amended fiscal year budgets for the Supreme Court. And I think, as you're aware, I'll also be presenting the Judicial Council budget in Justice Bethel's absence today. First, before I present a very limited budget, I just want to say thank you for the committee. You all have been very gracious to the courts over the years. We're very appreciative for everything you've done for us. You all recognize probably better than anyone the obligations, constitutional and statutory and otherwise, that the court has to fill every year, and the multiple classes of courts are all very grateful for you all giving us the resources we need to meet those constitutional obligations. So with that, thank you. I'd like to present now, first, Presiding Justice Peterson. You all, I think, know Presiding Justice Peterson is here with me today, and very appreciative for his leadership at our court. And Regina Jones, our budget analyst and officer at the court, is with us, along with T. Barnes, our fabulous clerk of court. If y'all have any questions that I'm unable to answer, they will be able to answer them, I'm confident. With that, the Supreme Court has an amended fiscal year budget that we've presented to you, and let me get to the tracking sheet, which might be easier for you to go by.
It's much easier for us.
Yes, so I'm looking at Section 10, and I'm starting with Section 10.1. And we have a couple of asks on here. First, 10.1.1 is simply the typical funds we have when we add a new justice to the court. That number is $35,129 and is in the amended budget request. 10.12 and 10.13 are pass-throughs, just required things we see every year, which unfortunately are typically increases for you all. But 10.1.2 is an increase in funds to reflect a 29.454% increase in the employer share of the health insurance premiums, and that totals $15,892. 10.1.3 is an increase in funds to reflect an increase in the FY23 employer contribution rate, and that totals $128,000. We have an increase because of population-based formula that the National Center for State Courts provides. Their due structure is based on population. and that's a $7,400 ask in the amended budget. Most importantly, and the thing that I really want to talk about here today with your members is the need that we have. You've already heard, I think, from the Court of Appeals, and I'm sure that Judge Rickman reflected the interest that they have in updating their IT system. We have the same needs because we have the same provider and network. I'm sure he elaborated on what that network provides in the nature of services to litigants and services to lawyers, the uploading of records from trial courts to our court, our access to the docket. Anytime we want to change anything, it requires an enhancement with Travere, our service provider. And as he explained to you, I'm sure, we were in court this afternoon, so I didn't have a chance to listen to his presentation, but there is but one person at Travere that can write code that we have for what is now a 12-year-old system. And so we've put it in the amended because it could be a one-time expense. It's not ongoing, but it is a $1.5 million expense to update the IT software at our court to enable us to do our job and to provide services and really have enhancements. Those enhancements include, unfortunately, safety enhancements and safety patches, which are necessary, which if we don't do this will expose us unnecessarily. So those are the requests from the Supreme Court of Georgia in your amended 23 budget. Happy to take questions about those if any members of your committee have any questions.
No question.
There are none. Okay, fine. Let me now move to the, find it, hang on one second. I got it right here. The Judicial Council budget. I'm now on section 6, I think page 2 of 18, or at least section 6 of the FY23 amended budget, which is the Judicial Council budget. There are but 3 requests in the amended Judicial Council budget. 2 of those are at the Institute of Continuing Judicial Education. One is to increase funds for personnel to true up the cost of living adjustment to account for one additional employee over there that didn't get that unnecessarily, and we need to address that. It's a $7,300 request. The other is an increased funds for operation at ICJE. As you know, ICJE provides training and funding, training to all classes of courts across the state of Georgia at every level, and that's a $64,000 request. And then the Judicial Council, you're aware of the automated data collection project that was passed by legislation, I think last year, that requires the collection of additional information from all of our classes of courts. It was really born out of, fairly so I think, born out of concerns that the JWAC judicial workload assessment process, where we decide whether somebody needs a circuit needs a new judgeship or not, that data wasn't as complete as it could be and as accurate as it could be. And so we're always striving to make sure that we have good, accurate data on which you can base your decisions about funding additional judgeships as recommended by the Judicial Council, which I chair. And this request at line 6.4.1 is a $70,000 request to increase funds for $50,000 of which would be one-time funding for the implementation of that project, and $20,000 would be ongoing funding, which you'll see in our 24 budget when we present that. Happy to answer questions from your committee if anyone has any about the Judicial Council budget.
No questions. I guess that's why you're the Chief Justice.
Well, I'm not confident that's not the case. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you, Colonel.
Thank you.
Bye now.
That's it. Do we have anybody else that wishes to speak on the supplemental appropriations? We had several agencies that didn't have anything, and I don't know whether any of them showed up or not. Nope. Okay. We're adjourned.